keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling and flare. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch the scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat, beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, it is Wednesday, the 18th of October in the year of our Lord 2017. It looks like we're going to have a special show tonight. We're going to have... It looks like... Okay, there we go. It looks like we're going to have our special guest on tonight, L. Deeds. Nick's taking the night off. Nick's visiting family. I have no idea where he is right now. I think New Mexico or somewhere. And Jake is making a movie about probably demonic possession, but we will see what Elisa Lam turns out to be. Without further ado, I'll introduce our special guest, L. Deeds. L. Deeds, how you doing tonight?
Hey, GB, can you hear me?
I cannot. Maybe something. Don't cover your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Blessed be.
Well, it's a special night tonight. Special night tonight. We're gonna talk about a variety of things. Not a usual show for us. God, we got Vegas, we got the fires in California, we've got what basically the fake misnomer of Pizzagate has become, which is Pedogate, which, if anybody wants to look it up, just in mainstream media, there's 3,022 named pedophiles they've arrested and put into the public record. So that's a lot of people they've been arresting since Trump's got in, and I'm not really afraid to say that because he changed some of the policies for whatever reason, that a lot of these busts are going on. Now, of course, that's together with some of the busts of things we don't care about, which are big busts of pot dealers and stuff, which no one cares about except Attorney General Sessions. But I think ultimately things are changing in a positive direction. Of course, there's a lot of things going on with this tax plan, too, we can talk about. But what do you got on your mind tonight, El?
Well, DB, the only reason I ever got involved in participating in your podcasts, and thank you for having me back, is because I was in that first wave of people who Pizzagate crashed down on. And I think it might have been close to a year exactly. I think that the Podesta emails were coming out exactly this time last year. I think that the October surprise we were promised is perhaps coming 12 months late. I dare pray for that. But in the meanwhile, sure, there are giant fires. And may I be specific without disregarding the environmental devastation? Let's talk about Hollywood burning down way past due.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Harvey Weinstein, I think he opened a can of worms, and by no means is this guy the worst person in Hollywood. He's really, truly not. There are far worse people in Hollywood. They're higher up the food chain. This guy was in charge of Miramax. Don't get me wrong. He's a studio head. He's very important. And people like to pretend that he's so important they called him God, like Meryl Streep, who's a whole nother can of worms we can get into about people that are willingly going down with the Titanic, known as Hollyweird or Pedowood or whatever you want to call this disgusting and sick industry that basically uses sex as currency and abuse as a ritual to make yourself into, I guess, a star. But I mean, not a shining star, not a shooting star. These people definitely pay for their fame with their soul, one way or another, if you're a metaphysical person or not. These people are I mean, you can look at Rose McGowan. She's probably got 10, 20, 30 million dollars in the bank, and that's never enough. She's still damaged. She's still angry. She's still hurt. She still wants revenge. No money makes it better. So a lot of these people make the deal, and then they realize it wasn't worth it in the long run. It just wasn't.
Well, let's talk about making the deal. I mean, if you want to talk about Rose McGowan, I think she was 19 or something when she started getting cast in movies. I mean, I can't say that I've seen much of her work, but I know she's been around, and she certainly has a voice of, authority to describe Hollywood. The Weinstein material is just sort of like a pustule, honestly. You know, there's just more underneath. It's pouring out still. He's not the only one. There's a lot to it. It's hard to know what to cut into first. Do we talk about the A-list glamour girls who made the deal for decades and now, like over their shoulder, they're sorry? Do we talk about young women who were manipulated and sort of settled into a path of success? And I mean, it's hard not to judge grown women, mothers, who didn't decide to say a damn thing until... Now, who kicked up this hornet's nest? Now, that's my next question. Who did Harvey Weinstein piss off?
A lot of people think it was his brother, who's a similar mogul, that he wanted to get rid of competition, and that in the end game, in the scheme of things, that this guy he's an untouchable. So when he goes down, really all it means is other kingpins decided that they didn't approve of the way he was conducting his business. He was a liability, and he truly was, because he had an insatiable sexual appetite, and he was just a creepy, scuzzy, scummy, stereotypical dude. Like, if anybody's ever seen the show Californication with Duchovny, the producers are basically all Harvey Weinstein. They really are. They'll sleep with anything that moves, and they'll hit on everybody. And no women are too married. No women are too young. Within reason, I guess. But again, this opens an additional door where there are people where there is no too young, and that's kind of what Weinstein is going to lead to, and that's where I think people need to stop using the ridiculous asinine term of Pizzagate and instead put in Pedogate. And all they need to do is look up Dennis Hastert and people that are in charge of bills. I mean, people that can make legislation happen. Look at the stuff Jerry Brown's been signing in California that gives a lot of people that are sexual abusers a free pass in the and they use the excuse of they don't want to offend people, they don't want to discriminate against anybody. Well, I have to tell you, if you're a pedophile, you do deserve to be discriminated against and probably just eliminated. And I really hate that this political correctness and the LGBT community is getting dragged into these muddy waters, but that's exactly what they're doing.
Oh God, you. Every time you talk, it's like a cornucopia. It's hard to know what to pick at first. I mean, I haven't. I have friends in the LGBTQ community who none of them have endorsed, supported, or, to be frank, uttered a word about this attempt to attach what they're trying to call a sexuality as opposed to a pathology to their movement or their community. And I guess that's my objection on that point. Where is the vociferous denial, and what do they call it? When you reject it. We want Hillary to disavow. Why is the LGBTQ community, when it comes to disavowing this attempt to attach pedophilia as a sexuality instead of a pathology, a terribly destructive pathology, actually? I get spitting mad just talking about this, and the network runs so deep and it's so broad. I mean, when we're talking about Hollywood, we're pulling on a thread that really does loop through, the elite cities of our world. It really does go from Paris to Morocco to D.C. and elsewhere, Bahrain. There really is a network. There really are beautiful children being scooped up and swept away. And some of them are being turned into predators themselves. Some of them are being destroyed. Some are being used until they're destroyed. I mean, the most horrifying thing I could ever tell you is that everything we're saying is true. It's all true. God, I wish I didn't know, to be honest with you. It's horrendous, because what can people like you and I, what can people like us do about this?
The only thing you can do is just keep spreading awareness until you become personally involved, which, I like to use, and it's kind of a poignant analogy, is that it is kind of like a wildfire, speaking of, what's going on in NorCal, but it starts small, it's a kindling, and then it jumps into some underbrush that's been dead for a while, and it catches fire, and what was a conspiracy theory 6 months ago is now widely accepted, yet people continue to mock people like Alex Jones, who we understand is an actor. I mean, he even admitted the fact of that matter in his trial to try to contain parental rights for his children now that him and his wife are divorcing. So he had admitted as much. He's a court jester. But that does not mean that him and his team do not pull up factual information, just like the mainstream media gives you snippets of factual information. So you get, from one end of the extreme to another, you get somewhere in the middle is the truth, okay? That's what I'm trying to get at. And what they're doing with this hashtag Me Too, what they're doing with all of these people coming out is they're trying to basically make it seem like these monsters that are perpetrating these crimes have something that can be cured, something that is not their fault, that, look, all these women around the world are being harassed. Can't be the monsters you think we are. We're just people. We just have the wealth to get away with it. We have the wherewithal to abuse without any any recompense to the victims whatsoever. I mean, they just make them disappear. So it's a slippery slope. It's a psyop. It really is. They're trying to now what they're trying to do, which is the thing that's really peeving me, is they're trying to say, well, Weinstein's the same as Trump, who's the same as Clinton. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Are you totally out of your mind? You have somebody that has now over 50 women say either, harassed them, groped them, in some cases coerced them or forced them into performing sexual acts on him. That's a little different than a guy saying he wants to grab him in the pussy and saying it, okay, versus another guy who was accused by Juanita Broderick of raping her and was accused by many women of raping her, and whose own wife got the rapist of a 12-year-old girl off. So you cannot compare even the three of them. Shit, you can bring in God, there's so many people, and you can kind of help me out with this, but Lolita Island, whoever owns that, and you'll tell me in a minute.
You're talking about billionaire, financier, spy, and pimp Jeffrey Epstein and his Little St. James private, is it Bahamian? Barbados? He's got a private island. He's got a private island, and he does the worst things there you can possibly imagine. And probably most people listening to this have already looked up Jeffrey Epstein. They may have perhaps seen the temple-looking thing on his private island. And I mean, I don't want to imagine what went on there, but I know that he collected dental chairs. There's a pictorial, like post-raid of Little St. James. And I think it might have been Daily Mail. It was some UK outlet. And it's weird. It's not like our houses. I mean, I don't have dental chairs or a temple at my place.
Yeah, I mean, it's going down the wire with this. I mean, so the thing with this guy Epstein is he's kind of like I don't want to call him a top of a pyramid, but he's definitely got the juice to be able to pull a human trafficking network and in a sense make it feasible. He can grease the wheels with money, and he has the island, and he has the planes. He has everything he needs, right?
Well, but my question is, who's supplying him all this? How is he a billionaire? What is the basis of his wealth? Is he simply I mean, people say Mossad, and I'm not even sure I know what it means. Is that Israeli Secret Service?
That is. So, I mean, and this is going down a completely different kind of sphere of thought, and we can get into this, but it goes to the notion that if a guy like Braddock is an FBI gun runner and / millionaire, that Epstein being a NWO child runner / billionaire makes a lot of sense, because how much is a child worth? $100,000? How many kids can you steal a year? 100,000? Of course you become a billionaire. I mean, so it only makes sense that because of the product he's moving, he's a billionaire. Arms dealers are millionaires. Child movers are billionaires. So it totally makes sense. And with his background as a private pilot, shit, he has logs with Clinton. I mean, Clinton went to yes, Trump did go to that island. Here's the thing. Trump wouldn't be going through all this. He wouldn't allow all of this to happen if he wasn't dirty of being probably a scummy misogynist who probably doesn't have any dirt on him that's pedophilic. But this is going to branch out to the people that do have that dirt. And I'm sorry, there's a huge difference between saying, I'm going to grab her in the pussy and wanting to have sex with women that are overage versus raping children.
Well, it's interesting. I think you've already touched on propaganda. And of course, we know, quote unquote, propaganda is legal, something Smith-Mundt Act, MUNDT, Smith-Mundt Act. So it's been legal for at least a few years to propagandize us, and I'm sure it's been legal before then too, depending upon who you pay to do what. However, what was that about Kurt Eichenwald?
Well, here's the thing with Assange is going insane right now. He's releasing the nuclear option. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure if that means his person has been compromised. I hope not. I've had questions about Julian even being Julian for at least 4 or 5 months now. I thought he was, the logs showed that private planes left the UK and they blocked off Heathrow Airport and made a fake fucking terrorist scare and nothing happened. And that's when they got Julian out. So,
well, it's fascinating because we were talking about propaganda and how do we really know what the hell's going on in a country we're not even in? I don't know if Julian's real. I know the Podesta leaks were coming multiple times a day until this raid and this gigantic, or recall it, the gigantic DDoS fail. So it's not just, if it's staging on a level that I have to be impressed by.
Yeah, it's, you can't put anything past them because they have, for all intents and purposes, an unlimited budget. I mean, you're talking about probably a couple $1 billion a year black budget. So they can get in there, they can grab them, they can pay off who they need to or make them disappear. Now, the Eichenwald thing and what we're seeing with Assange and what we're seeing with these new revelations, these new WikiLeaks coming out, and you can say all you want about Assange being a Russian agent. He does release Russian facts and cables that damage Russia internally. Now, it's not the same scope as the DNC. The reason why is because the DNC hires incompetent dipshits, pardon my French, who use unsecured email servers and get hacked by amateurs. Gusafer is Romanian. He's not Russian. He doesn't have allegiance to Putin. He just realized what an idiot all of these pedestites are with technology. All these stupid pedestite will be known as Luddite in the future because it's going to mean somebody that's an idiot with technology as opposed to somebody that rejects it. You cannot be in that position. You cannot tell Hillary Clinton, yeah, go ahead and use unsecured, whatever, blah, 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 and not encrypted, because this is what happened. You went down in flames, all your little dirty secrets, all your disgusting stuff that you're into, and all of the sanctimonious hypocrisy is just being brought to the forefront, and it is glorious to see. Now, Eichenwald was an NYT reporter. You remember him as Tentacle Porn Boy, who got caught with tentacle porn as a background window on one of his screenshots, and then said something about, well, his wife knew, and he was just making a bet, and he was going to show his kids that this existed, or some disgusting excuse. Well, it just came out that he may be actually a ringleader of one of these disgusting sites. So we're going to see, it's on some of the more dubious. I can't call any source fake news because mainstream media is only right half the time. So what are they, fake news? What is everything fake news? Because nobody actually knows. I mean, can we even believe our own eyes anymore? I watched the Vegas shootings and I still don't know what happened. So you gotta think critically now. You can't expect a source to be infallible because they're just not. No human is infallible. A lot of the times what we're seeing are observations. We're using scientific method and we're making the best hypothesis we can. We're coming to a conclusion and then we're writing it down. And we don't know for sure. So what I'm getting at is Eichenwald, look him up, tentacle porn guy. It's coming out. He was probably running one of these disgusting sites. And the guy's got kids, dude. And I think more and more of these are going to come out. Can't hear y'all.
Mm-hmm. Can you hear me? I personally believe the Eichenwald porn thing was more to torment those of us in the know and distract from James Comey, also for those of us in the know. But I think the thing I want to circle back to now is why they threw Weinstein under the proverbial bus. Now, it's been suggested that he's a huge misdirect. He's there to draw fire. There's probably a military term for that. And I say to that, we did not expect all of these independent testimonials, perhaps. And if, in fact, he's been thrown in front of the bus to distract, then how come we have an ex-Pussycat doll coming forward and saying she was in a famous, all-singing, all-dancing prostitution ring? And it was so bad, she quit before their first album came out. How does that happen? How do we have Corey Feldman saying, no, he's never personally met Harvey Weinstein. He is, in fact, the herald of the pedophilia that fuels the Hollywood beauty machine. But he would suggest that being a slime bag doesn't mean that you are, in fact, also a pedophile. So we have people who are visible, famous, known, and hopefully credible. I tend to believe the victim. I mean, you prove it to me, Weinstein, that you didn't. You prove it to me.
Yeah, he already admitted as much. I mean, he went to Europe to go to a sex addiction rehab facility, and isn't it funny that Hillary's now over in Europe, and what you're going to see is these guys are going to flee to, specifically probably flee to London. A lot of our listeners are pretty savvy and understand that the City of London is a separate corporate entity. It doesn't follow any British law. It follows the law of the City of London, and part of that is that pedophilia is legal, and basically anything that is disgusting is legal there, and in Washington. And honestly, probably in the Vatican's canon. I have no idea. I haven't researched it, but you're talking about the 3 pillar city-states that are controlling the secret society, underworkings of Western slave Babylonian money magic construct. I mean, that's really what we are, and that system is failing. It's a lot of truth bombs we're dropping tonight, and a lot of, I guess, acronyms we're using that people are probably going to understand. So, I mean, one of the pillars of power is pedophilia, and it always happens because everybody with a conscience knows it's wrong. Everybody with a heart knows that it's literally the worst thing you can do, probably minus torture and murder of innocents. I mean, so it's just one of the ways these guys create a blackmail situation perpetually.
Have you heard of Hadrian's Wall?
Yes.
Did you know Hadrian, quote unquote, deified his child sex slave spouse? Did you know that?
No, I mean, but it does not surprise me at all. I mean, the Romans, right?
Well, he's famous for that wall, and he's famous as they used to call it pederasty. I think we call it child rape now. But my point is not that Hadrian was unique, although being empowered to turn his suddenly dead child sex slave spouse into a god, not everybody had that access even then. And yes, of course, those in the know that poor boy, that sex slave boy, raped by an emperor. I believe it was Antoninus, forgive me, and for certain James Alefantis uses a very famous bust of this boy from some European fancy museum as one of his thumbnail icons in his social media. I'm sure many of you, if any of you are listening, I'm sure many of you know that. But what I'm asking, the point I'm making, DB, you suggested that normal people, or us, we all know that child rape is wrong. And I would ask you, does human nature change? Because here's a famous figure from antiquity, and what's the second biggest hit? Child rape.
God, you could argue that human nature hasn't really changed. We're on the verge of it changing. Me, Jake, and Nick, and especially me and Jake, will wax poetic about how transhumanism's kind of right around the corner, and we're starting to see that. There's benevolent aspects of it with nanotech being used possibly to prevent or even cure, all kinds of diseases by getting in there and doing subatomic fixes with lasers and what have you. But, we understand that the way to control a human is to find its motivations. And generally speaking, there are about 12 distinct personality types, each with their own motivational spectrum. And once you can tap into all 12 of those spectrums, you can control basically everybody through different kinds of reward and punishment scenarios. So we're all aware of punishment. We see it every day on all of our social media and even the rare mainstream media where the punishment, they're not even bothering with trials. I mean, if you're a pain in the ass, they'll just shoot you. They don't care. They'll just kill you if you make it to where it's going to be any problem at all for any of the officers. They'll just kill you. They don't care anymore because the liability of you surviving a misconduct lawsuit is more for them than them just shooting you and paying your family $2 million. And that's the truth, and that's the insurance industry. And then with the other end of the promise, which is the good life, the American dream, that is still there, but you have to make X dollars, and you've got to understand that the sacrifices you make to make your way to that socioeconomic level are not going to be something that you want to do in most cases. It's not like the 50s, 60s, and 70s where dad got out of high school, went to a factory, and mom could stay at home and they could still retire at 60. It's just not happening.
Can you hear me?
That I can.
It's not really the focus, and I don't know how important it is, but I do want to engage with the construct you just presented of society, successful and striving and sort of trajectory upwards American society, for the lucky, for the mostly, I would suggest. Factory jobs were plentiful, and all kinds of demographics came up at that time. Look at our political landscape. People going to college in the 60s. John Lewis, for example, these are 2 or 3 generations removed from the blight of slavery, which, America did not invent. But anyway, we have political figures from that period of striving an upward trajectory who are still in the firmament. So let's focus on the positive. Whatever you think of the performance, obviously racism didn't stop John Lewis, Corrine Waters, etc., from penetrating the very most powerful rings of American influence. However, I do want to suggest to those who might have heard DB suggest that having the mom stay home and raise the kids, there might have been somebody who got like a twitch to that because, well, why did the women have to stay home? What I want to offer is that we're talking about the children who grew up in the Great Depression, people with nothing, perhaps not even with homes. And I would suggest that the possibility of staying home in a beautiful house and raising your kids while the fella could earn the living was a tremendous luxury. Nothing to look back at them and judge them for, nothing to think is a bad choice now, certainly a great choice then. If you could build a strong family, would you not do that very thing after the cultural and economic destruction, families that splintered throughout the Great Depression? I'm just offering that. Let's talk about traditional family roles and what their value really was. Society was built off of that generation.
Yeah, I mean, you make such a great point, and you have to argue that a woman in the 20s versus a woman in the 50s was a very different world, and it lent itself to it being a true luxury to have a beautiful modern home that was probably either perfectly hot or perfectly cold during the different seasons, that offered the ability to throw your dishes in the dishwasher and your clothes in a clothes washer and save yourself hours doing basic hygiene, having time to have a social life, and not needing to work. Now, that didn't mean women didn't provide essential labor. Somebody has to raise kids. They don't do it themselves, and we're seeing right now what happens when kids do raise themselves using the iPad and the smartphone. You have a bunch of people that know a whole lot of things but can't do anything with that information because they have no experience, wisdom, or mentorship. So I've brought it up before. A child today knows more but can do less. And that's just, it's very, very obvious.
And let's also talk about the idea of home training. I'm sure that's a phrase that you've heard before. What I refer to when I use it is the intangible, sort of inexpressible communication of how one lives, how one behaves. You're going to do things a certain way, or there's going to be no structure. There's going to be habits and traditions within the household, things that knit the family strongly together, or there isn't. And I see people out with their babies, and even the baby has an effing screen in its hands. I mean,
And we've only begun to see some of the ramifications in society, with society becoming less respectful and almost as a byproduct more violent. We see road rage. I'm not going to lie. I have road rage, and it boils down to people being in a 3,500 pound piece of steel on wheels going 70 miles an hour and not regarding you or your presence and putting your life and those that you love that you're driving with at risk simply because they choose to be unaware, or because of who they are, they just are unaware. And you're seeing that through each envelope of our culture. For instance, you could go to a store and notice that now when cash registers ring up your purchase, they don't have the amount of change anymore. They actually have a picture of the dollars and the coins that the person needs to give back. And that's very scary that somebody can't in their head take $2.25, $2.25, and know that it's two $1 bills and a quarter. They need the picture on the screen. I mean, we're at that position in our society and our culture, and I like to say our anti-culture, since we did genocide the natives and really never really established a true Americana yet. We're building it still to this day. That it was bound to devolve into what it has become, which is, I love this word, it's a kekistocracy, which is the most evil and heinous and ruthless people. The scum of the swamp rises to the top like a lily pad.
First of all, I have to object to your use of "we" to describe what was done to the indigenous peoples of America, okay? I have to object to that "we" because not only did I personally have nothing to do with that, although had I been alive at that time, I probably would have had no voice with which to do anything about it. I had nothing to do with it. In much the same way, I am not involved in the wholesale trafficking of humanity, live slavery, right now. I'm so sorry. I resist it with all of my will, and I find myself praying, although I never was a praying person. I have found a spirituality because in such evil, there has to be an opposite. If this is the way the world works, there must be the opposite. And it feels like our whole culture has sort of been twisted in this direction. I mean, I look and I listen to popular media. I see this Danielle child off of the Dr. Phil show being packaged and presented in this very, it's corrosive the way she's being put across. And I've seen fan vids of even younger children mimicking her, and it feels quite intentional. This child does not get a record deal and a media push without interest in what she's suggesting. And against that turn, I feel we must exert our will in a more positive direction, even though in the awareness of such depravity. And we look at this child being exploited, turned out at 14, period, turned out, she's being turned out. And then we extrapolate that into those of us who have been researching this pedophilia epidemic we're undergoing, this elite pedophilia epidemic we're in the midst of. It's them projecting their values down on us. That is why the music is trashy and basic. That is why the images are trashy and basic. That is why it all seems incredibly stupid. If you're even an iota aware, you know that what you're looking at is completely idiotic. There's just no depth. Why did the guy shoot up Las Vegas? Why are they taking a knee? Like, where's the meaning behind these actions? We're being stirred up intentionally, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, as far as Vegas goes, it's falling apart. I think before we got on, we watched some of the Jesus Campos, Ellen DeGeneres, absolute crap, and with his little freaking handler next to him, prodding him in the back every time he went off script. Didn't even look like the same guy. I mean, all the good points there. Why go on Ellen if this is hard news? This could potentially be what's called a bulwark against the Second Amendment, where they say this is the worst case scenario that could happen because of unregulated access to firearms. And they're going to have this guy give his lone interview, which he admitted he'll never talk about it again, to Ellen. This is the hard-hitting news. This is one of the absolute, God, if there's not but two important things about the Constitution, which is the first and the second, that are built one on top of the other. You're talking about the foundation and the floorboard of our society the right to speak out and defend the right to speak out with arms. There's no other country in the world that has that written into a legal contract with its people from its government that says, we're going to let you tell us whatever you want, whenever you want, and if we do anything you don't want, you have arms and you can take us out. Yet they've managed to use the First Amendment to propagandize themselves as a basically, for lack of a better word, a patriarchal force, which they are not. They are a predatory organism. You are the food. You are the enemy. And now it's coming into full view, because if you look around the world, who's left to fight? We got North Korea. They're nuclear armed, okay? We got Iran. They're almost for sure nuclear armed. And if they're not, they have massive biological weapons. We can't really fight those two countries without committing national suicide, which is what they're trying to lead us into. And because people aren't biting, they're realizing that the only thing left, the last end game, is to turn the military against its own people, to turn our lethal forces inward. And we're starting to see that. That's what Vegas is. And we can take it a step further and say, if you want to get into conspiracy theory, that the wildfires in NorCal represent the exact same thing to the next level. They're using now not overt, but actual weather and climate warfare, and taking advantage of ripe environments to cause as much destruction and damage as possible. I don't know if people understand this. By Sonoma County being basically leveled out, in 3 years, a bottle of wine might cost 3 or 4 or 5 times what it does today. Do you think that some of these idiots are buying wine futures right now and you can maybe track their money? What do you think, Elle?
Probably, but I just can't understand why they're not burning down Hollywood. Hello? Hello? Are you there? Seems like we lost DB. Hey, is this a call-in show? If this is a call-in show, I invite any listeners who might be listening to call in. I'll figure out how to pick that call up. Well, I don't see any calls coming in. Yeah. I've never had to fill air on my own before. Perhaps no one's even listening. In any case, there's a suggestion that something's going to happen. Hannity keeps saying TikTok. I mean, we all know Fox is just owned by a slightly different faction of the exact same media empire. And they all stay away from the real news, the true news. But it could be that we're coming to a tipping point. I certainly hope so. And I would encourage anyone hearing this that if they want change and don't know what to do, at least set your intention and consider it every time you look in a mirror. Anytime you see think about it often. Set your intention at it. Because you have to believe, if you believe in any of this, that occult forces and energies are being used against us at this very moment. So set your energy against that. I mean, what can it hurt? Maybe it'll burn calories.
I'm back. Sorry about that. That was a bit of a technical difficulties with some of our equipment going on. But I think what Elle was basically alluding to was, a lot of this stuff's going to have occult undertones. They're bubbling to the surface. There's not a lot they can do to stop it. Those of us that are in the know are kind of watching, waiting, seeing, people that we maybe associate with as acquaintances. You're starting to see some of the stuff that they're putting out on their social media or even talking to you about are changing a bit. Things are opening their eyes, and they're not, I wouldn't say that they're so hesitant to, humor you as far as some of these ideas were in the past. I love to use, again, Alex Jones as a kind of extreme end of the barometer, the spectrum. His classic line of they're putting, chemicals in the water and turning the frogs gay, and everybody made a, bunch of meme trains about it and like to clown on him, or people used it as a way to discredit the guy, which, when you look it up, there's a chemical that a geneticist found that does indeed make frogs switch sexes. It basically what it does is it triggers a marker in amphibian genetics that says in a environment where there are no males, sometimes the females can spontaneously change sex to proliferate the species. This was broached in Jurassic Park, ironically enough. And I'm trying to think. I think it was like azitrane or something, some kind of chemical, where this researcher found out that it basically triggered this marker and flipped the sex. So if it can make a frog change from a female to a male, what would it do in a mammalian system? Would it create more? Maybe homosexuality, maybe, God, who knows what it could do in utero. So what I'm trying to say is things that have been kind of poo-pooed or made into a laughing matter are now kind of ringing true. And, one of those things is that these guys really do worship dark forces. I don't know if you believe in words like Satan or Lucifer or the devil or Memnoch or a million other terms for him or her or whatever it is, but it's the opposite of light, and it has to exist because we know love is light and love is good, so there has to be hate, which is evil. Elle?
I don't know much about Memnoch the devil. I know that a Podesta email said that Hillary was going to sacrifice a chicken to Moloch in the backyard and get the lucky rabbit's foot out of the attic, or some occult sounding weirdness. It was not even Halloween. You can look that one up. But I can draw attention, and those in the know already know, that there's a famous picture of Mr. Podesta, who you may or may not know was Obama's climate change envoy to the UN. Anyway, there's a picture of him with his hands in the air, and one is a fish and one is a number 14. And that is a reference, as you probably know, to the paramount Egyptian dickless lord of hell, Osiris. And it's just a matter of fact that somehow he got torn into 14 pieces, or was it 15, and they only found, his sister wife only found so many. So yes, that is who Skippy is repping in that picture. You may or may not know that that is a cult, right? I mean, what explains that? Let's think about who Podesta is in like sort of the span of living political memory. Like he goes to camp with child rapist in chief. I do refer to Speaker James Comey, who served a very cushy, I'm sure, 13-month sentence somewhere. He just got out this summer. He was sent away in Minnesota. I don't know why. I don't think he lived there. And it's a funny thing that I believe also Anthony Weiner is going to serve his time in Minnesota. So, what's going on with that? It's incumbent upon you at this point to be curious.
Yeah, there's no way that, and was Hastert not in Minnesota? I mean, I believe he was. There must be some facility they send these freaking complete degenerates to mind wipe them or whatever. But of course, we know they don't do any of that. They just probably have a Ruth's Chris experience at every meal and get massages, and they don't do anything to them at all. It's club fed because they're all like that, and they don't think anything's wrong with it. It's the Roman mindset.
Right, and getting back to the reality of who Dennis Hastert was. Okay, so he was Speaker of the House. He preceded Nancy Pelosi. Imagine how closely together they must have worked. In any case, he was Speaker of the House when he went down for fraudulent financial transactions. See how they keep doing that vis-a-vis the Awan brothers? What we're getting are fraudulent financial transactions instead of the heart of the matter, which is, in Dennis Hastert's case, ranked child abuse, pedophilia, etc. And in the case of the Awan brothers, rank treason and all of, of course, their affiliates within our Congress. But in any case, the ones whom we are paying right now to not work more than 3 or 4 days a week. So Hastert, when he was Speaker of the House, and by the way, contemplate this, Speaker of the House is literally third in line to the ascendancy of the presidency. For example, there's the president, there's the vice president, and if those two both go out, next is Speaker of the House. So Dennis Hastert was 2 heartbeats away from paramount power in our country. Whether he's an executive, a middle manager, or what have you, he would have been literally untouchable at that point. When Dennis Hastert was Speaker of the House, that was during the time when Representative Mark Foley, those of you who go back a little ways may recognize that name because he went down for praying, sexting on the middle school D.C. Page Volunteer Corps. I don't know if they were paid, but in any case, they were boys, and this man could not leave them alone. Rep. Mark Foley was also on the board at that exact time, not just repping them in Congress, which of course he did, but on the board of NCMEC. And those of you who are back, you know, there's a John Podesta and there's a Brian Podesta. And if you utter the latter's name on social media, you can expect some kind of timeout or shadow. I myself am in the shadow band, I believe. So when Mark Foley was preying on the D.C. Page boys, and in fact he did it to such a degree they ostensibly shut the whole program down, it still exists in other parts, other state capitals. In fact, there was another pedophile bust in one of those earlier this earlier this year. Look it up. It's not an epidemic. It's not a problem. This isn't systemic. What are we worried about?
Oh God. And that's the thing. It's like you get these people that get on their high horse and say, oh, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be the Democrats going down. It's not. It's the whole thing. It's the whole, the foundation's just rotted out. It's GOP, it's DNC, it's lobbyists, it's judges, it's police officers, it's celebrities, it's athletes, it's, God, if they're in front of you, it's radio DJs, it's singers, it's Broadway stars, it's playwrights of some of your favorite plays, it's screenwriters. Anybody that can influence you in any way, shape, or form, I would say there's about a 50-50 chance they're involved in one of these activities that's going to make them go down.
And I'm really glad we circled back before the show's over, because it's really important that if you have children or if you have friends that do, there is this juggernaut of production named Dan Schneider working in Nickelodeon land. And he brought us Ariana Grande, most recently that I'm aware of, but he also has brought along this series of stars, including Britney Spears' little sister was a star for him for a while until she got knocked up at 16. And anyway, start looking into this, because Dan Schneider is for sure a weirdo. He gets these kids... There's an investigation going on, and if you haven't dipped your toe into that stream, I'm sorry, you have to. And the reason why you have to is because this is a guy who not only occupies a parapet where he can just pick and choose the children and use them and either break them or pass them along. He didn't break Ariana Grande, but Amanda Bynes is broken, and she went through his factory. She started when she was 13. I mean, people are talking, they've been talking since before this Weinstein broke, and all I can say is that my intention is set on this being the tidal wave that pulls over pedogate, because if Weinstein only hurt adults, we're lucky. You know, I'm sorry if you were 19, I'm sorry if you were 26, I'm sorry if you wanted to be famous and just made that deal and doesn't feel good. I'm sorry, but the real issue is the children. And Corey Feldman has been on the vanguard of this for years. He's been out there taking the waves. Now, we've had Reese Witherspoon say she was bothered by, molested by somebody when she was 16. We have other people coming forward but not naming names, and we need to cross that threshold. It cannot happen soon enough. And if you haven't looked into Bryan Singer, new father Bryan Singer, Michael Egan, Bryan Singer, there's just so much more to say. Michael Egan accused Bryan Singer of trafficking him in Hawaii. Podesta email, WikiLeaks people already know that Hawaii is one of the places that cited hot dogs in Hawaii, $65,000 for a private hot dog party. I mean, if you look at it for more than a moment, it doesn't seem right. Like, why is the president having a $65,000 hot dog party? Why is Podesta's follow-up, his replacement in the UN climate change envoy spot, this TD something or other, he's there in the Podesta emails, the one talking about dreaming of your hot dog stand in Hawaii. And I feel nuts saying these things like they mean something, but if you look at it for a moment, you know it means something.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to just go do a Google search for Ben Swann's Pizzagate expose where he goes...
Never Google.
Right, well, DuckDuckGo or anything else where you don't get onto a list. But Ben Swann did an expose at CBS 46 Atlanta where he went into a lot of the signs and also the nomenclature they use to try to hide their devious activities, like child porn being cheese pizza, blah, 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 blah. Hot dogs were, of course, male prostitutes. That would make a lot of sense why cheese pizza and male prostitutes cost $65,000.
So look into the hashtag expose Dan Schneider, and also realize that I believe it's yesterday another Nickelodeon executive has been accused of harassment. Of course, this is by adults. Is this another thing to draw fire, perhaps? Or is it going to start a cascade of people coming forward who have worked for that network? Please join me in hoping and wishing and really setting intention on the latter. This could be the thing that pulls this all over, and the sooner the better. If I don't talk to you again, expose Dan Schneider, expose Bryan Singer, and show your family an open secret this holiday.
Well, hopefully maybe we can even do this tomorrow. We'll see. I don't know what we're going to do with this show tomorrow, if we're going to take it off. But, ultimately these are important topics. These people do need to be exposed, and their names need to be put out there, and all their ill-gotten gains need to be given to their victims. It sucks for their families. Their families are indeed victims in a lot of cases themselves, and we can have some sympathy for them. But in the long run, it's better for the planet if these people are no longer free to continue their abuse cycle. We can talk all we want about demonic possession, transdimensional entities, and every other thing we may or may not believe in, but ultimately at the end of the day, these are human beings. We think they are capable of the same thought process as we are, and we can only assume that this is a multi-generational, and when I say multi-generational, I mean maybe multi-millennial cycle of abuse that goes back forever, along with ritual and occult. And it's just never going to end until it's exposed and we decide that we're not going to take it anymore. I'll leave the rest to you.
I don't know what I can add to what's already been said, unless we're going to go down some deeper rabbit holes. And my goodness, they're there and they're well trod. There's a whole generation passing away that has been, holding the door for us to come through it. And if you shirk your moral responsibility to become curious about this, and not only that, but to talk about it, you're shirking your duty. Don't shirk it.
Thank you, Elle, for being with us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We can end the show by saying, do not let your intellectual curiosity wane. Don't stop questioning the official narrative. Thanks, everybody. Maybe we'll be back tomorrow.
I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.
My name is S.M. Dixon.